Hello guys, I wanted to show you the first step in our grid portrait drawing. So what we are doing, what the plan is to take an 8.5 by 11 picture and we are going to enlarge it to fit this 18-inch by 24-inch piece of paper. So essentially enlarging it to fit this large piece of paper by hand. So at this point you should have a portrait that you chose of someone. I chose this portrait of Toni Morrison. She's one of my favorite authors of all time, and she recently passed away, so I decided I wanted to do a portrait of her. So one thing you might want to start out doing, just to make it simpler for yourself, is that you can see that when this was printed on our printer, the photograph did not go to the edge of the paper. So when you're measuring out your inches, you're not going to have perfect inches from the photograph. It's actually starting kind of a quarter way in. So you can do one of two things. You can either make sure that your ruler matches up with the edge of the photograph on your paper and then start measuring out your inches. Or you can take a scissors and trim off that border and then mark your inches there. So you would trim off all this extra white around the edges and then start marking each side on the photograph itself. I can work around the border, so that's what I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do first is line this up so that my ruler is lined up with the bottom of the photograph, not the bottom of the page. And I'm going to mark 1 inch all the way up my page. So 4, 5, 6, 9, 10. And you'll notice there's about, and this might not be true for your photograph, but for mine, this last little bit here is not a full inch. So I'm just not even going to bother drawing that last little bit. I'll probably just stop my portrait there. If the top of your photograph is something that you really want to do, and you'd rather take it off the bottom, make sure you start marking your inches from the top and go down so that that extra that you're just going to trim off will be at the bottom and not at the top. So now I'm going to do the same thing again, matching it up with the photograph, not the edge of my page. And I am going to mark my inches again. Now, again, if I look at this, if I just glance at it, it looks like 7 inches ends here, and I've got about 1/4 of an inch that goes to the end of my photograph. So again, I'm going to have a little extra that I'm just going to cut off. I think I do want it taken off the side, not off the side. I would rather have more space over here and her fingers included, rather than the back of her head. So I am going to start my inches going this way. If I wanted to go the other way, I would flip my ruler and go this way and have the excess over here that I would cut off. So I'll show you what I mean later when I cut this off here, or when I mark the grid. So this is the extra that I have. That's not a full inch. Do this quick here. So this is where, you know what, this is a good example of how I made a mistake. So remember I had on this side, I made my 1 inch marks all the way up the page, and there was an extra 1/2 inch up here. It didn't make a full inch, but I decided I'd rather trim it off the top than the bottom. So when I went around and started marking on this side, so the opposite side, I started an inch over here. So my lines are not going to match up. They're actually going to make a diagonal instead of a parallel. So what I need to do is go back and do this side again, but start measuring my inches from the bottom, not from the top on this side, so that my inches match up. I've done this a million times and I still make that mistake quite often, so don't feel bad if it happens. So I'm going to start at the bottom of the photograph, not the page, and start marking my inches from the bottom up. 3, 4, 5, 6, 9. All right, so now I've got, you can see that little 1/2 inch at the top here is equal to the 1/2 inch up there. All right, and same thing down here. The extra little bit that doesn't make a full inch is on this side. So I want to make sure that matches up with the bottom. So I need to start measuring my inches going from left to right. All right, so I've got that little extra here, and that'll get trimmed off. So now what I can start doing is marking my grid, matching up my lines, and drawing it from one end to the other. I'm going to do all my verticals. And don't forget that little extra, because that'll at least show me where that last inch is. All right, and then I'm going to go and do I'm going to do the horizontals. So match up my marks here. My last line here. All right, so I've got this whole photograph gridded to an inch. So this is an inch by inch. Next step is to grid out my large sheet of paper. So now that I'm doing the format is going to be portrait, not landscape. So I need to remember that when I start transferring this to the larger piece of paper. But right now, what I need to do is to measure out 2 inch by 2 inch. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did with my photograph, but I'm enlarging it to a 2 inch by 2 inch square instead of the 1 inch by 1 inch square. So at this point, I'm going to take my ruler, and from the edge of the paper, I'm going to measure every 2 inches instead of every 1. And I can just move my ruler up when I run out of marks there. Two, and that's exactly 2 on the end. So this is nice. It lines up perfectly. I don't have to worry about any extra they don't need. I'm gonna have to trim off. So again, every 2 inches, 8, 10, 12, 14. All right, and then I'm going to do these sides. So this one and this side. Again, line up my corners here. So this is not exactly 18 inches, if I remember correctly. 16, so it's a little bit shy. So there's just a little schnibble at the end here. So I'm gonna make sure that I start counting my inches from the top coming down so that doesn't turn into a slant instead of a parallel line. So not 1 inches, we're going 2 inches. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, and then 18 is just a little bit shy of the paper. So this is where it gets a little tricky because I have a shorter ruler, but I can make it work here. So I'm going to start gridding out my page. All right, and since my ruler, I'm gonna stop here. You guys get the idea. Just keep going. Since my ruler does not go all the way across, I could go across and then try to line up my ruler, or I could make more markings. So what I would do is start at the top of the page, mark every 2 inches again. And then what I would do is I would be able to match up these lines to get my horizontal line. So from here, from the center to the out, just because my ruler is too short to go all the way across my page. So this is just a simple way to make sure that it's accurate all the way across. All right, so I think you guys get the idea. This is my finished piece. It's gridded out 2 inch by 2 inch. You can see there's a little extra on some ends, but I will explain that in the next step. Essentially, I have my photograph gridded out to 1 inch by 1 inch squares, and my large sheet of paper gridded out to 2 by 2 inch squares.